they're still available to you on recording. So go to shalomraleigh.org, and you can go to our Jewish Community Relations Council page, or just put a /JCRC. That's shalomraleigh.org/JCRC. And you can see the events that have in the past and the future. For the past, just hit watch recording here and you can see what's happened. And for the future ones, you can click register here and you'll be able to be live with us for the next events. So tonight, I know Jonah is starting out by interviewing his daughter, who apparently is running for, I'm not sure what Jonah, what's she running for?
Class president.
Okay, very good. And of course, David Price is with us tonight. I'm so happy you're with us. I'm going to move off the screen and let you two talk, and then I'll come back at the end to say goodnight to everybody. All right, Jonah, it's all yours. Go ahead.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for being with us. Great to have you again for another one of these wonderful conversations we're having with candidates ahead of this very pivotal 2020 general election. We are honored to be joined by the U.S. representative from the 4th Congressional District of North Carolina, longtime Congressman David Price. And it's just really great to have you here. Thank you so much. Let's first kind of just start, because this is going to be interesting, because right now you are the representative for a lot of us. And yet when we go to the ballot, your name is not going to appear because of all these changing lines. So we're going to figure that out. That's obviously a lot of things. What do you make of all of that when you're constantly having to figure out this redistricting, when your constituency kind of changes every once in a while?
Well, we have started telling people that if you find yourself not in the 4th district, just hang on, you will be soon enough. And sort of works out that way for a lot of folks in Wake and Durham County. Well, I don't like it a bit, and I don't think voters like it. I mean, this is going to be the 3rd district that I have run in 5 cycles in this decade. And that's just a monument to districting malpractice by the General Assembly. And what they've done is just gerrymander the state to a fault. An evenly divided state ended up with 10 Republican and 3 Democratic U.S. House districts. It took 4 years, but the courts finally threw that out. And then we still had 10-3, just a little more compact districts. And then it took 4 more years, and the courts threw that out. And now we have yet a 3rd iteration of the districts, and it's still gerrymandered. Now, I do think this time with some of you may know Deborah Ross, who's running in Raleigh in a lot of what used to be my district. And then Kathy Manning is making a good run over in Greensboro and Winston-Salem. I do think those 2 members are going to be great additions. That would bring our delegation to 5 to 8, still lopsided, still gerrymandered. We're pursuing a couple other seats, but the point is we shouldn't be doing it this way in the first place. There should be a nonpartisan redistricting commission, just like there is in now about 15, 18 states. I hope North Carolina will go down that path.
It really is fascinating to watch. You, your colleague G.K. Butterfield, and Alma Adams. Look, even if you're not necessarily representing the district, I mean, every congressman represents the state. No matter if you are officially, fighting on behalf of residents of Chapel Hill, for instance, you were instrumental in helping a lot of North Carolinians down east get Hurricane Florence recovery money. So, and all of these things that you fight for, whether it's the CARES Act, whether you do so much on transportation and housing. We're going to talk about your role there, being the chairman of one of the, on the subcommittee, appropriations on housing and transportation. I mean, these are things that affect all North Carolinians, let alone the most of the country, but all North Carolinians. So even if you are not necessarily on the ballot, you certainly, everyone here is grateful for what you do and is affected by what you do on behalf of all of us in Washington.
Thank you. I appreciate that, and that is the way I try to operate, particularly since I'm the only Appropriations Committee member from either party in from North Carolina in the House. So that is especially an important role when it comes to things like disaster relief, or for that matter, harbor dredging, or land purchases out in the West, or whatever it is. I do have that statewide responsibility. And then here in the Triangle, I mean, who knows anymore whose district they're in? I just say, if you're in the county, you're in the county. We're going to work with county officials and leadership, organizations like the Jewish Federation, others. It's not going to matter that much. And I'm sure Deborah Ross will approach it the same way. G.K. Butterfield and I very cordially shared representation of Durham. He's now going to represent other counties, but you're right in what you say, basically, about how we approach the job.
And look, there are a lot of real races. You talked about Kathy Manning over in the Winston-Salem and the Greensboro area. I also know that Richard Hudson's district is now, I think the 8th district around the Fayetteville area, and Mark Walker no longer running. I mean, we're getting into inside baseball now for people who aren't following all the districts. But the North Carolina congressional slate is going. I don't think it's going to be 10 Republicans, 3 Democrats after this cycle.
No, this last court-ordered redistricting made sure of that, I think. And so George Holding in the 2nd district and Mark Walker in the 6th did retire because their districts became so different. And that's why Deborah Ross and Kathy Manning have the excellent chance they do. And then when you talk about Richard Hudson in the 8th district, and you could also talk about Dan Bishop in the 9th district, these are districts that I think in a normal year would be pretty tilted, pretty badly tilted against us, but not so this year. I mean, Pat Timmons Goodson is making a really strong run in the 8th district, and Cynthia is not far behind. I think they're both very much worth supporting.
I don't want to age you. You're young at heart. You look great. I'm sure you feel great. You've been doing this a long time, and you have been in Congress, a real veteran. Let me start with this question. Why do you want another term? Why keep going with this?
Well, it's a combination, I suppose, of my feeling that things that I have set out to accomplish and things I want to leave in good shape aren't quite where they need to be yet, but also a sense of where the country is and the kind of all hands on deck approach we need right now. I've told a lot of friends that when Donald Trump was elected and it was clear that we were in for a really rough ride, but ironically, that's probably was going to be the way we won the House back in terms of Democratic leadership. When I made the decision to run in 2018, that really was a 4-year decision because it was predicated on getting the country turned around with new leadership at the top, and getting the Congress turned around. We worked very hard, and just think where we'd be right now without a Democratic House. I mean, I think having the House in Democratic hands makes a tremendous difference now. And as you said, it's partly been wanting to be back in leadership, but it's not just that. I have some things I want to accomplish, and in particular, I'm where I've always wanted to be in terms of committee leadership. I'm the chairman of the Transportation and Housing Funding Subcommittee. Both are extremely important areas. The infrastructure of this country and affordable housing, decent housing for all of our people. I mean, those are areas that are critical to our well-being and also have been under-resourced. We've talked for a long time about a major infrastructure initiative, but it's been mainly talk. And so
I do remember something about Infrastructure Week.
That became a punchline, Trump's Infrastructure Week. Well, okay, where's the beef, to take another metaphor. But anyway, the transportation and housing work, I really want to make housing a front burner issue that I think it deserves to be. I think it deserves to be right up there with education and healthcare. Even on the Democratic side, it hasn't always been. It hasn't always had the prominence it should.
It's interesting you mentioned that, because actually I was thinking in preparing for this interview, how do you make something like that interesting where also, I mean, look, there was a show on ABC called Designated Survivor. And the joke was on the main character, who was the Secretary of Housing and Urban Development. Now, we know that's a position right now held by Dr. Ben Carson. I think his nomination, maybe for the wrong reasons, gave that office extra attention, because what's a brain surgeon doing leading that department? Certainly to affordable housing, how do you make that relevant? How do you make that an issue when, especially you talk about, when we think about the triangle, there are a lot of affluent areas. It's a place where there are a lot of high-tech growing jobs. There absolutely is an affordable housing crisis going on, because it's going to appear for people who live in the city of Raleigh, there's actually a bond. I believe there's a question on the ballot about whether to approve a bond for affordable housing. So
Right.
how do you communicate? How do you lobby, for lack of a better term, interest about something that, at least on the surface, they don't think affects them?
I think people increasingly think it does affect them. It's, of course, you do count on people's goodwill and people having a sense of wanting an inclusive community. People wanting a community where the people who work in the community and serve the community can live in the community, and where people of modest means don't just keep getting pressed out and out to the outer suburbs. I think when people confront that and think about it as they have, this has been a front burner issue in our municipal elections. Certainly in the last two mayor's races in Raleigh, I would say affordable housing has been the number one issue. It's been a major emphasis of the county commission in Wake County. Similar in Durham. It's people do respond, I think, to that notion that that housing is really a basic good. For the individuals and for the community, and that it needs to be widely available. And then it's just a step from that to saying, well, if you just let nature take its course, just let the market take its course, let gentrification take its course, then before you know it, you're really going to have very inadequate housing for lots of people, especially people close in who need to be close in to the city. So I think there's been widespread support for these housing bonds. I hope there will be for this one. Durham passed one overwhelmingly. And the idea there is, and it's all levels of government, the federal government has an enabling role here and a kind of a catalytic role, but it's you're not going to get this done if you don't have buy-in at the local level. And so there has been a lot of support for the kind of zoning laws, the kind of placement of affordable housing developments in strategically owned parcels of land, conforming transit to housing patterns,
and the idea is, and sorry to cut you off, but to peel back the onion a little bit, I mean, the simple premise is you create a level playing field so that a teacher, a policeman, a firefighter can all live in the same place where some of these other people, other high executives can live, because then if you can't afford to live in the area you're working, you're not going to work there.
That's right. And so it's just that letting nature take its course isn't the answer. Letting the market forces just go their way isn't the answer. There does have to be conscious policy at all levels. There has to be some buy-in. This is the ultimate area of public-private partnerships. You look at these affordable housing developments, and they're very attractive these days. I mean, you never know that they're subsidized housing just looking at them. But they typically have, businesses taking advantage of the tax credits. They typically have nonprofits of one sort or another. They typically have home funds from the federal government, and so it goes. We've gotten to be pretty good at putting these things together. A lot of people on this call know about DHIC, the Downtown Housing Improvement Corporation in Raleigh. That is a model affordable housing organization that has done just wonderful work.
And these are rent controlled, whether apartments or whatever, that they have income requirements. They're designed for a specific people middle income or lower income that they're going to be able to get. And what better springboard for them if you have safe and affordable and adequate housing that leads to better emotional health, which is better productivity, and could be a springboard for people to contribute more to society.
Right. And we've learned a lot about how to put these communities together. We don't warehouse the very poorest people anymore in concentrated, segregated housing. We have a mix normally of market rate units and subsidized units. We have, one size doesn't fit all. We still have a need for public housing. And by the way, we need to keep our public housing maintained and keep it safe, and that's a big challenge. But there's also a place for people who, with just a little assistance, a little rental assistance, can be out in the open market. And then there's home ownership, and there are ways you can facilitate that. So I think it's an exciting area of policy. It hasn't had quite the emphasis that other areas have, maybe, but I think we're getting there. And certainly the citizens of Raleigh have indicated that they want to get there. As I say, it's been the lead issue in local elections for some time now.
You know what could give it more emphasis if they brought it up at a presidential debate? Wouldn't that be something?
Well, wouldn't that be something? A lot of things ought to come up in presidential debates. One thing that I want to do, though, hoping that, of course, that we have a President Biden, I want to urge this on the administration. I plan to do that. I mean, we'll do what we can from the congressional side, but a lot of people like me have plenty of ideas for a new administration and a great deal of excitement about some long overdue things we need to get moving.
Take us behind the scenes on Capitol Hill, because you've been there. You have been there under President H.W. Bush. You've been there, President Clinton. You've been there, President W. Bush, President Obama. You've been there when Newt Gingrich, that Republican wave. You've been there through 9/11. You've been there through the Great Recession. Where does this, I don't want to say crisis, rank, but give us some perspective on how things are the same, how things are different, what's working now, what is the same. Just share some perspective on that.
Well, it's going to be hard to answer your question without appearing pretty partisan, because these are partisan times, they're polarized times, and a lot of what I want to express does have to do with the president and with where he and his capture of the Republican Party, including the Republican parties in Congress, where that has taken the country. We've just never seen anything like this president, and the damage that he has done to our alliances, our moral leadership in the world. You start on the international scene, and it's just really,
is this something
really
you
alarming.
feel? Is this something you feel in the halls of Congress? Are you not having the kind of bipartisan lunches, breakfast, dinners, meetings? Is there a palpable? Well, I guess you're not there anyway right now because of the pandemic. But even before the pandemic, is there just a different climate there than there has been?
That's a little different question, Jonah, because yes, it's different, but it's not totally different. I mean, I have many close friends and associates on the Republican side, and one of the things that has always appealed to me about appropriations and the work we've just been describing, and this would also apply to my international work, the House Democracy Partnership, which I chair, which is parliament-to-parliament support for strengthening institutions in emerging democracies. Both of those areas are areas of considerable bipartisan cooperation. That's one reason I like them. I mean, the HDP, House Democracy Partnership, is totally bipartisan, and appropriations often is. And so we still work together, we still collaborate and coordinate, and this foreign policy shift that I've been talking about, believe me, when the House Democracy Partnership, we go in on a bipartisan basis. We were in a few months after Trump's election. We were into Ukraine and Georgia, and we had uncomfortable questions raised even then about this president. What's this Russia thing? What's this thing about not caring about human rights and democracy? And my Republican colleagues and I had a kind of delicate job to do, but we managed, I think, with some integrity to talk honestly about that. So a lot of the Republican members of Congress are not happy with the direction things have taken. On the other hand, they haven't distinguished themselves, in my opinion, by standing up to the president. I'll acknowledge they have a tough dilemma with their own political base, but still, it's been a difficult time in the Congress, and we're more polarized. You talk about Newt Gingrich and the kind of changes that took place after he came into leadership. Yeah, there's been trends toward more partisanship and more polarization, but I do think under Trump that has taken on a new dimension. Just quickly though, I mean, think about it. There is continuity. There's continuity with what we've seen. There's continuity with Nixon's Southern strategy. There's continuity. I mean, the Trump tax cut, of course, is right out of the Bush playbook. There's continuity with the unilateralism in foreign policy that goes back to the second George Bush. There's certainly continuity with things like wrecking the Iran nuclear agreement. The Republicans tried to do that from the start. So it's a mixed picture. I think there's a lot to be there's a lot that we're divided over and need to work on. I do think in most respects Trump's made it worse.
Well, that's a good transition because you just brought up the Iran deal, the JCPOA. I don't even remember what it stands for, but I remember the parameters of it. And this was very polarizing in the Jewish community. This was an issue that I think most of our Israeli friends certainly thought one way. American Jews maybe thought another way, but I mean, look, there are plenty that divides the Jewish community, plenty. But this was something that was very polarizing. And even to the point where, if I'm sure you remember, Prime Minister Netanyahu was invited by then Speaker John Boehner to give a talk about the deal. I admittedly wasn't living in North Carolina, so I don't know much about North Carolina's delegation. Did you attend that speech in March of, I believe, 2015? Was it 2016?
No, I was part of a group of maybe 50 members who did not. I held a press conference right after it with some members who attended and some who didn't, but all of whom thought it was reprehensible that that invitation was extended in the way that it was, and that it was accepted by Netanyahu. It was in the middle of the Israeli campaign, of course, but it was also done in total violation of the way these joint sessions usually are put together.
Well, and that would look that's ancient history now. I mean, it just seems so long. But the fundamental premise, though, of that deal being many on the right side, on the right wing side of, or the right of center, that deal had a lot of issues. That deal had a lot of issues. People were against the fact that it legitimized, validated, acknowledged almost the Iranian regime. The claim was that it emboldened them to do even more, that it allowed them to cheat, it allowed them to just ride out the deal. So and certainly nefarious activity continued. We continue to see, even in Israel, from Hamas and then Hezbollah, the kind of activities and funding which came from Iran. So I guess what was why support that deal? Even Vice President Biden has acknowledged that there are issues with that deal. So why double down on that now?
Well, the agreement was a remarkable diplomatic achievement, which put together our European allies. Even Russia and China were parties to this, and it basically put Iran's nuclear program. They were within a year of breakout, It indefinitely postponed that. It put inspectors on the ground. They're actually still there. And there was no cheating. I don't think there's any evidence at all that there was cheating on Iran's part. In fact, I think at the time we pulled out, the evidence was that there had been no cheating, and the international
Israeli intelligence might argue otherwise.
No, Israeli intelligence never established that, and Israeli opinion was not monolithic. Netanyahu was using this from the very beginning. He always wanted Iran to be the issue, not anything else that he might be asked to account for. But there was plenty of security and military people. Often they were retired. They would speak out after they were retired. But there was plenty of Israeli opinion saying that we should be careful that this is a good deal and an enforceable deal. But there's a lot of Israeli support for the deal. And there's a lot of Israeli opinion now that we're worse off, and that we've gone down this path of what's called maximum pressure. There's no evidence that's working at all. I think, and as far as the Jewish community here, yes, it was divided, but the group that I'm talking about, the group that opposed very much the Netanyahu's being invited and the way that whole thing came down, that many, probably most Jewish members of the Congress were appalled by that.
It was an uncomfortable situation. I think anytime Israel becomes a political football is lamentable.
Well, let me just say, it shouldn't be a political football. It is in this country's interest and in Israel's interest for the friendship and the alliance and the admiration that we have for Israel and what has been achieved there. That for that to be bipartisan, it has bipartisan roots. It's generally been bipartisan, but I think everybody on this call knows that there are people who've tried to make it a wedge issue, and that's unfortunate. I mean, I really hope in a new administration we can repair that.
Well, let me ask you this question, because look, the president, his messaging, his rhetoric, the way he conducts himself aside, many in the Jewish community, I mean, look, it has been bipartisan for decades. The capital of Israel is Jerusalem. It should be Jerusalem, Israel. At the end of the Passover Seder, we say next year in Jerusalem. We say when we welcome our Torah out in the service, we talk about Zion and Jerusalem. So maybe you can lament or disagree with how Trump went about declaring Jerusalem the capital of Israel, but do you support the principle of the capital of Israel being in Jerusalem?
Yes, of course. I've supported it. I think most political leaders in this country have supported it for a long time. It's been in the platform of both parties and so on. But don't belittle how it was done and the way it should have been done. There's a reason why Democratic and Republican presidents very solid in their support for Israel. Until Donald Trump, there was always the sense that this needed to be part of a broader agreement on issues with respect to to Israel and the Palestinians and the full range of issues that we've had and need to get some traction on. And so the formulation always was, yes, the capital will be moved to Jerusalem, but we're going to do that as part of a broader scale diplomatic effort. And what Trump did was not just move the capital. Trump shut down that consulate in Jerusalem that had been the effective embassy with the Palestinian people. Trump shut down the Palestinian office in Washington, saying we don't even want a Palestinian representative in the city. Trump cut off unilaterally humanitarian aid to the West Bank and Gaza. It was just one thing after the other. And I said to Pompeo in in a state and foreign operations subcommittee hearing in the middle of all this. I just went down this list and said, and now you expect the Palestinians to be grateful and to make a deal. I said, what am I missing here? He had no answer to that, because this movement of the capital, it in principle, of course, it's right. The way it was done, I think, was counterproductive, and certainly these other gratuitous hostile policies have made a kind of Israeli-Palestinian settlement that's just and that has staying power. I think it's made it harder to achieve, much harder.
Well, it is true. I mean, the Palestinian-Israeli issue is as, I think, jumbled as ever before. And if you look at the ground, the snaking of the different settlements and communities and the disputed territories, that had long been an issue, and that had long been at the forefront of this idea of Middle East peace. But also, one of the worries of moving the embassy to Jerusalem was there was going to be mass violence and uprising. There wasn't. And then there was the thought was, well, Arab nations will never agree to it, or they'll never move forward with any normalization with Israel without a deal with the Palestinians. But then we just had two Gulf states, United Arab Emirates and Bahrain, who, the Palestinians are accusing of being philo-Israeli. I have friends who are now in Dubai for the first time, and they're like having a love affair. It's an incredible experience, and you're having, you're having the delegations meet, you're having nonstop flights, you're having the opening of embassies, all without any movement on the Palestinian issue. In fact, the only movement is this stopping Israeli annexation of the territories, which was almost like a right-wing threat. So how do you make sense of all that?
Well, it's a tangled web, but let me just make a stab at it. A couple of things. One is one thing is that we should welcome the normalization of relationships between Israel and the Arab states. Judah will remember the many trips I took in the 90s with Danny Abraham and the Center for Middle East Peace, and we were going to the Gulf states, we were going to the North Africa states, and the idea being to encourage a trade office here and an exchange of personnel there that would move toward normalized Israeli relationships in the region. And the idea was, of course, that an Israeli-Palestinian settlement would greatly facilitate that. But in the meantime, we were trying to bring this along. And so, yes, that's a good thing for these for the boycotts to be ending and the relationships to be normalized. Think about the way this is happening, though. I'm uncomfortable with the extent to which our foreign policy has been our Middle East policy has been subcontracted, not just to Netanyahu and one particular Israeli faction, but it's been subcontracted to Saudi Arabia. And what you're describing is a movement in the region that's, yes, it is, at least for now, in certain ways, is bypassing the Palestinian issue, because these states have their own reasons for aligning with Saudi Arabia is behind all this, of course, and I think that's pretty well agreed. But that's also true, I think, that this country has been far too uncritical and far too acquiescent in our dealings with the Saudis. And so this is partly a product of that, and therefore is kind of unsettling. And then the second question, I think, is does this really move the ball in terms of the Israeli-Palestinian issue and the future of Israel as a Jewish and democratic state alongside a Palestinian home state? And I think the answer is no, it doesn't move the ball there. And one would hope that it might. I mean, it could be yet that as this normalization process continues, there is some interest taken by some of the Arab states, by the Saudis in particular, in reviving the Arab peace plan or otherwise moving back towards some sort of realistic accommodation between Israel and the Palestinians. But so far that does seem farther away than ever, not because of the rapprochement with UAE, but because of the larger context in which that's occurred.
Let me ask you this question, because I will tell you, and as I'm doing my, as you know, especially as a journalist, I do my best to remain objective and to obviously to never let on what I think. But I will say, in the community of where I am, there is a lot of discussion of, yes, we like Joe Biden. Yes, we think his style of Democrat, would be good for Israel. But we worry about the tenor. We worry about the influence of Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib, of even Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who canceled an appearance recently at a Peace Now event marking the assassination of Yitzhak Rabin, the former prime minister. Then you look at the other side, and you see, again, a total legit discussion should be had about Trump's motivations, about the president's friendships, about the pastors who were there at the invocation of the Jerusalem embassy, Hagee and Jeffers. I mean, absolutely, those should be on the table. But you have a president who, after Obama, who, right or wrong, there was a perception of him creating daylight with Israel, affirmed that Jerusalem is the capital of Israel, affirmed the Golan Heights being in Israel, condemning Palestinian, what they would say is the intransigence when it would become to recognizing Israel and some of their own rhetoric. So what do you tell those voters in the Jewish community who, I guess, yes, on the one hand they say, well, Trump is the most pro-Israel president we've ever had, and on the other hand they say, I don't trust this new generation of Democrats, and they will not be pro-Israel, and some of them could be anti-Semitic.
Well, speaking of anti-Semitism, I think the main concern there should be the rise of white nationalism and the embrace of that by the president and a failure to speak out about that. I mean, what was being shouted on the streets of Charlottesville, and you know that it had a heavy anti-Semitic component. So to say find people on both sides is not exactly calling that out. Let me answer your question just by telling you the approach I've taken in the Congress. And this involves work to try to protect the Iran nuclear agreement. It involves work trying to preserve two-state diplomacy against its abandonment in the Trump so-called peace plan. And it involves a pro-Israel point of view that refuses to think that the way to be pro-Israel is simply to trash the Palestinians, to close their office.
There's this misconception, which the only way to be pro-Israel is pro-Netanyahu. There's more than one way to be pro-Israel, but yes.
That's all right. You said it. That's exactly right. So this roughly has been the way this has gone. Ted Deutsch and I, Ted is
Congressman from Florida.
Ted is to the right of me on these issues. But we have thought, as we defended the Iran agreement, for example, and as we defended two-state diplomacy, Ted and I have thought that it was important to, when we're sending a letter or introducing a resolution, I don't write it just the way I want it, nor does he. We found common ground in the case of the annexation issue, which was extremely important, I think, to speak out on. It was extremely important for at least one major party in this country and one branch of the U.S. government to say to the Israeli government, annexation is an unacceptable idea. And there was broad agreement on that among Democrats. And rather than get into all kinds of other issues, we settled on a very stripped down, very simple, but very forceful statement about annexation. And on that basis, we got, all but just a handful of the Democratic caucus. Now, who didn't we get? We didn't get the squad, okay? Nor did we get some people on the far right in these terms. But it's worth it. And as the Biden administration comes on and we think about Israel and the Middle East and how we're going to position ourselves, I say broad is better, inclusive is better. Let's not assume we have to solve every issue at once. Let's focus on the fundamentals.
But right or wrong, and I, there are some incredibly look, just like you, there's some incredibly pro-Israel, right. I hate again the label, but like the right of center Democrats almost. You have Ted Deutsch, you have Debbie Wasserman Schultz, you have Max Rose, you have Josh Gottheimer, you have Mikey Sherrill.
Those are not all the same, Jonah, not by any means.
I know, but what I mean by that is, for all of them though, they don't get, and this is an indictment as well. And look, and you and I can have our own conversations about the state of American media, right? They don't get the attention, okay? But it's Elliot Engel who is now not going to be there. It's Ilana Ross-Lettinen who's not going to be there. It's Nita Lowey who is not going to be there anymore. Steny Hoyer, who knows how many terms he has left. You just kind of hinted that you're going to be retiring soon. So right or wrong, the perception is that this new generation of Democrats that is going to come up, the face of them, the perception is that these are the squad. So how do you fight that? Or how do you fight that perception? Or better yet, how do you fight back against the squad? I don't even like coupling them together because notably Ayanna Pressley, who was a member of the squad and who the congresswoman from Massachusetts, she voted for the resolution condemning BDS. So she went against the squad. So that should be called out. But how do you, people are getting mailers of the Democratic Party, Pelosi, Schumer, AOC, Ilhan Omar.
Well,
how do you fight that?
Well, first of all, you just say it ain't true. And I think affirmatively, we in the Democratic Party need to have honest discussions of these issues. Nothing should be out of bounds in terms of hearing people out. But I do believe a regrouping, or it's a grouping. I think where we are right now, I think what Ted and I accomplished, and I've done the same thing with other members. I think what we accomplished, it left Josh Gottheimer out on the right. It left AOC out on the left, but it was 190 some members. That's the mainstream. And that's what we ought to be focused on, is solidifying that and making that not just sort of perceived as some sort of least common denominator. No, we had a forceful statement on annexation and on two-state diplomacy. That's not a namby-pamby position. It's a strong position we can get behind. It's just that we agree to disagree on some other aspects of the broader issue. And it's basically the art of compromise. But the art of compromise is not just compromise for its own sake. It's figuring out what's worth compromising for. And in my view, the American-Israel relationship and the support of a diplomatic solution there that will protect Israel as a democratic and Jewish state.
But let's say, God forbid,
a worthy cause.
It's a wonderful cause, and one that American Jews and Zionists should be supporting and championing. Let me ask you this question though, because let's say, God forbid, there's a war that breaks out in the south in Gaza, or Hezbollah with its 150,000 rockets pointing and raining down on the northern of Israel. Is there going to be trouble getting the Democratic caucus together for a resolution supporting Israel or sending emergency aid to Israel?
No, I don't think so. The support for aid to Israel has remained strong. There is, there's some talk about about what the expectations should be in terms of Israel's commitments, and those discussions can go forward. But there's no Hezbollah caucus, or there's no brief for Hezbollah in the.
There's no Hezbollah caucus, but you did have a congresswoman who basically accused Jews of having dual loyalty and said it was all about the Benjamins.
Okay, well, yes, we did, and you know how that went. So I don't think you'll be hearing that again.
Right, and we haven't really heard that. And again, I think it's unfortunate that these freshman congresswomen who have gotten all this attention, how are they able to get so much influence when there are three, and then there's so many others? Why is that we all know their names, but the congresswoman who won in Kansas in Kansas City, or in Oklahoma City, the congresswoman from Oklahoma City, first time to flip that district in 40-something years. How come she's not mainstream? To me, that's a much more incredible achievement than someone winning a, for lack of a better term, gerrymandered Democratic district.
Well, all I can tell you is that I and my colleagues are at this very moment trying our very hardest to pull all these folks over the finish line, and it is exactly the kind of members you're talking about. But let me just say to you, though, Jonah, I mean, I think the giving so much credence to these voices that are really not typical. This wedge driving, this is an aspect in the wrong hands. This is kind of
right
being used to
drive. And look, it plays right into the hands of the Republican narrative, and it takes away the
right. But our response to that, I think, has to be to come up with a narrative of our own that has some integrity about it. And it's not about pandering to this or that, but it actually is rooted in a solid appreciation of Israel and what it represents, and the importance of our friendship and alliance with Israel, but also a sense of what the equities are in the Middle East with Israel and the Palestinians, and the kind of ultimate diplomatic solution that makes sense there. And you just, if people are going to characterize that as being anti-Israel or soft on this or that, you're just going to have to fight back. I mean, I'm not about to accept that. And I've been part, as you well know, I've been part of the group in the Congress that's sometimes tried to take a more balanced view of some of these things, and has. I was one of those late in the Obama administration that wanted to see John Kerry put forward a plan, a sketch of what a settlement would look like, and he did that, and he was castigated for it. But I think that was a pro-Israel move, in the sense of being a constructive move toward where that diplomacy needs to go. So they're going to continue to the other side is going to continue to drive a wedge here. I hope the Jewish community, Jewish organizations won't be a party to that. There just needs to be a healthy appreciation all around. And I tell you, Ted and I did feel a lot of support on that, on what we did, the breadth of it, and the approach that we took. Okay, that was appreciated by AIPAC. It was appreciated by J Street. It was appreciated by Peace Now. It was appreciated by the full spectrum of groups. None of those people were telling us, get sectarian about this. Get,
right.
They understood what we were doing. And so that's my plea, I guess, is that we're going to have an opportunity to regroup here, and I intend to be part of the regrouping, and I hope we'll have community support, community dialogue as we do this.
You've known Vice President Biden a long time. You came out and endorsed him in the primary. He has long been a champion of Israel. Tell us about, I know you're on the House side and Senator Harris is on the other side. Have you met her? Have you interacted with her? What can you tell us about her?
Well, I don't know her well. No, I can't claim that I do. Lisa and I met her in Durham last year and really were struck with her personally. but I know her by reputation. We're through California colleagues. I think it's a good choice for Biden. It's a good political choice, but I think it's also a compatible choice in terms of the governing style that you're going to see. Everybody in a primary situation gets staked out a little bit here and there, but basically, I think she's a good progressive mainstream politician with a lot of savvy and a lot of respect for the diversity of the party she's trying to lead, and I think she'll be a good partner, and I certainly think she's proving to be a campaign asset.
Yeah, she's sharp. She's very sharp. I don't think anyone can take away anything like that, anything other than that. The Vice President Biden, has talked about restoring the soul of this nation, and he talks about, as you brought up, Charlottesville. You are very aware, and I'm glad you mentioned about the rise in anti-Semitism, especially from white nationalists, which, people talk about anti-Semitism on the left, and yes, there are a lot of words of anti-Semitism on the left. But the action of anti-Semitism, the horrific shootings that we had in Pittsburgh, in California, we have these neo-Nazi flyers being handed out at Duke University. Besides the platitudes of saying we need to fight hate, we need to improve, the discourse in this country, how do you fight this? How do you strike back at it? Is there something on a congressional level to do? Is there more? I don't know. I don't have the answer, and I don't even know if there is an answer to this question. But what do you see? So, the vice president, if Biden's elected, the divisions aren't going away immediately. So how do you heal? How do you heal these wounds? How do you start to lower the volume on what has been revealed? I say Trump hasn't created racism, hasn't created anti-Semitism, but he's revealed it. It's always been here. So how do you put the lid back on?
I tell you, one thing that's very sobering about what we've been through the last 4 years is exactly what you're saying, how much of a difference leadership makes, and how much it matters. Of all the kind of latent tendencies that are out there in the community, how much it matters what you bring out, and what leadership encourages and foments. I just have been struck by that, and I've been sobered because I think a lot of the safeguards we think we have in a society like ours maybe aren't so strong. I think leaders can run away with demagoguery in ways that maybe we didn't think we were susceptible to. Just a comment. I think it's something to be concerned about. And let me just quickly say, in general, the way one deals with this, there are two ways that are in tension, and I think it's important to do both. When there are explicit incidents and just egregious examples, they need to be called out by name, and anti-Semitism called out as such. And people say they are offended when people say Black Lives Matter and don't say more than that. Well, no, if there's an incident of egregious racism, yeah, Black Lives Matter. Say that. Say what is appropriate to the situation and to the underlying values that are being offended. But I think it is also important always to move to common ground in some way, because I do think a sensitivity to anti-Semitism and bigotry and a sensitivity to racism is. I don't think that shouldn't be a lonely cause. It should resonate with the broader values we hold as Americans and all of our faith traditions. And so it is important, I think, to move to that more universal ground as well. That was Martin Luther King's gift. He was there wasn't any question what he was about, but he always was able to invoke the Declaration of Independence, the broader values we share, and to find common ground with people of different faiths and no particular faith at all. And we got to move to that level as well. And I have enough confidence in our country and its people to think that as we do that, we will get a positive and constructive reaction most of the time. And working at it, we can inoculate ourselves, I think, against some of these things.
Right. And as we talk about anti-Semitism, as we talk about Israel, and housing, can't move forward on any of this stuff if we don't take care of the pandemic. So everyone talks about these other issues, and I know we're running out of time, but it's. I know you have two beautiful grandchildren. Tell me about. Are you able to see them? Where are they?
Well, first, I agree with you on the pandemic for sure. It's just imperative that we crush this virus and also commit ourselves to a serious economic recovery that's going to follow, and not just be content with building a bridge halfway across the river, so to speak. The grandchildren are fine. We have three. We have a new granddaughter.
You got to update your bio then.
The California branch of the family. Genevieve is her name, and she's just gurgling her way through this pandemic. The London family. Charlie and Maggie are 13 and 11.
14 and 11.
14 and 11. As I say, going to school in a way that I think wouldn't happen here, and I don't quite get it, but they appear to have figured it out. And our son teaches at Brunel, and they're I don't know. I thought they'd be back in this country by now, but they're thriving.
And how are you and your wonderful wife, who I just had the pleasure of meeting, Lisa, or virtually? How are you holding up? It's you're in this like all of us. So how do you get through it? What's your favorite takeout restaurant? What do you like?
Well, we have some routines that we've worked out. We have a Saturday night movie that we've seen. Interesting. Oh, by the way, let me just make a free recommendation.
Yeah.
The movie that everybody on this call needs to look up is A Face in the Crowd. You know that movie?
I haven't heard about it. What's it on? Netflix? Prime?
Well, let me give you
Prime.
Prime. Okay.
And Turner Classics played it on Inauguration Day 4 years ago.
Okay.
I'll give you a clue.
And they played it a couple of weeks ago too.
Yeah,
this is okay.
This is Andy Griffith. This is a serious dramatic role by Andy Griffith. It's a story of a demagogue and his rise and fall, and that doesn't do justice to it. It is a fantastic movie. And it's a parable for our times. It was just about 60 years early, I guess, as it turns out. Anyway, we have the Saturday night movie routine. We do patronize the restaurants. I don't know. Our experience has been that you would think time would drag, but actually time flies under these circumstances.
Yeah. And Lisa, you're okay with
just go by.
And Lisa, you're okay with one or two more terms in Washington, or do you want them home?
Oh, I have always supported David's congressional activities. I care a lot about politics. I watch more MSNBC than he does 100 times over, and keep up.
You watch
with everything.
ABC, and you both watch ABC11 more than MSNBC.
Of course.
Yeah,
Never miss it.
Right. And you should watch the Nightline program about the two women who were killed.
Yes.
One of them is an American citizen who lived in Raleigh.
Yes, this is definitely something that we talked about this. Also, there's a important Nightline story, national story, and we're definitely going to give it more local attention as well. We can't thank you both enough. David, obviously, for your participation, Lisa, for your patience, and for sharing, David, with us. I've always, the Congressman and I, we've always had wonderful discussions with you. Every time you come to the studio, or back in the day, we'd always after the camera would stop rolling, you and I would just keep going, and it's been wonderful, and I so appreciate. And no matter, I've said this to Vice President Pence. I've said this. I said it last night to Speaker Tim Moore and to Greer Martin. No matter what, yes, I'm a journalist, but I'm also an American. I'm a North Carolinian, and what you do affects all of us. So thank you for your work with North Carolina and the American people in your best interest. And so we thank you for that. We
Thank you.
for
Judah, I think, was wanting to say something.
Oh, he's coming in. Yes, he likes getting the last word.
Oh, I see. Okay. All right.
Well said, Jonah. Well said. And I have to congratulate you, David, for handling some very difficult questions. Jonah was not nice to you tonight. He was really.
That's not nice.
No, you were.
I've asked him tougher questions before, I think. Immigration, the government shutdown. He knows.
No, I say that a little tongue in cheek, but actually it was very helpful because the challenging questions and all the different issues that not only our country faces, but also in the Jewish community, how we do see things differently. And you were you expressed yourself very well, David. I appreciate you understanding those nuances. And by the way, I do remember years ago, and you had been to the Middle East many times, and Israel, and were very supportive of businesses and connections between North Carolina and Israel. So that's noted and appreciated and remembered. I want you to know that. But no, seriously, John, you did very well. I appreciate it. Excellent. I think ABC11, what's this? Yes, I see a note here. They're giving you a raise. Yeah, I see that right here. Just coming over. And David, it's good to see you. It's been some time. And it's really good to see you. And appreciate. I'll add my words to Jonah's appreciating your work on behalf of all of us. This year, I was able to vote for you in the district. I'm supposed to be nonpartisan, but in the past, I couldn't always do that because the gerrymandering changed the district where we lived and how it related to you. I will want to I do want to add one more thing here to our listeners. We have one more event coming up, and that is Jonah will have the opportunity to interview our governor, Governor Roy Cooper. It's going to happen on the 26th of this month, before the official election. Even though I know many people have voted already, and appreciate very much. Look forward to that opportunity for that interview. And for those of you who have missed previous conversations, this is the fourth, I believe, of the five. Again, go to shalomraleigh.org/JCRC, and you can see recordings of this evening as well as the previous interviews that Jonah did over these last few weeks. So again, great appreciation to you, Representative David Price. Jonah, excellent job as always. And on behalf of the Jewish Community Relations Council of Raleigh and Cary, good night.
Thank you. Good night.